the removal of portraits from a historical exhibit in the Nebraska State Capitol on January 7, 2026 by Machaela Cavanaugh, exemplifies the complex intersection of legal accountability, political privilege, and potential bias in public institutions. This incident involved a state senator taking down framed images from the PragerU Founders Museum display, an authorized tribute to America's 250th anniversary featuring signers of the Declaration of Independence, Revolutionary War figures, and prominent women in history. The act raised immediate questions about criminal violations, including theft, vandalism, and mischief under Nebraska statutes such as Section 28 to 511 for unlawful taking and Section 28 to 519 for tampering with property. It also highlighted how elected officials might exploit their positions to avoid consequences that ordinary citizens would face, underscoring systemic inequalities in the application of justice. The event prompted discussions on whether the removal was motivated by partisan hostility toward the exhibit's sponsor, a conservative organization, or deeper prejudices against the depicted figures, particularly white male founders, potentially triggering hate crime enhancements. The exhibit itself, part of the state's semi-quincentennial commission efforts, served as a commemorative installation in the Capitol hallways, with security footage capturing the removal in detail. The senator transported the items to her office, an action that aligned with crimes like unauthorized use of property, Section 28 to 514, and receiving stolen property, Section 28 to 517. Local ordinances in Lincoln amplified the violations, including theft and vandalism under Municipal Code Chapter 9.24, disturbing the peace, Section 9.20.010, and disorderly conduct. Lancaster County provisions echoed these, treating the behavior as theft, trespass, and nuisance. Federal offenses added layers, with theft of government property, 18 U.S.C. Section 641, and destruction, 18 U.S.C. Section 1361, linked to the National America 250 initiative. The incident's partisan undertones suggested the senator's hostility toward the sponsor influenced the removal, framing it as an abuse of power rather than a mere rule dispute. This case also invoked psychological and ethical dimensions, with the senator's behavior analyzed through lenses of antisocial personality traits, narcissism, and oppositional defiance, driving destructive tendencies. Evaluations like forensic assessments and risk analyses could probe these motivations, revealing impulsivity, aggression, and lack of empathy. Political mentalities, including ideological extremism and revenge against rivals, further explained the act. Civil remedies for affected parties, such as PragerU, included conversion suits and trespass to chattels claims for property interference. The broader implications extended to disruptions like filibusters and outbursts, painting a picture of repeated misconduct eroding governance. Ultimately, the event served as a catalyst for examining how such actions, if committed by a private citizen, would yield vastly different outcomes, emphasizing the need for equitable legal treatment in public spaces. Criminal violations and legal frameworks. The portrait removal incident encompassed a wide array of criminal violations under Nebraska law, exposing contempt for public property and institutional norms. Theft by unlawful taking under Section 28 to 511 implicated the seizure and control of movable property owned by PragerU with intent to deprive. Criminal mischief under Section 28 to 519 captured the deliberate tampering that undermined the exhibit's structure and purpose. Theft by deception under Section 28 to 512 aligned with misleading justifications for the seizure. Unauthorized use of property under Section 28 to 514 described the displacement in defiance of ownership rights. Criminal trespass to chattels encompassed the unwarranted meddling with the items. Vandalism integrated into the mischief category as intentional impairment. Theft by receiving stolen property under Section 28 to 517 pertained to holding the portraits post-removal. Graffiti or vandalism under Section 28 to 524 addressed the defacement of public space through alteration. Littering of public property under Section 28 to 523 arose from the clutter and disorganization left in the hallways. Local ordinances in Lincoln further amplified the charges, reflecting the localized impact of the misconduct. Theft and vandalism under Municipal Code Chapter 9.24 applied to the illicit handling and disruption in a city building. Disturbing the peace under Section 9.20.010 stemmed from the upheaval caused on the session's inaugural day. Disorderly conduct charges emerged from the chaotic and disrespectful atmosphere generated in a governmental venue. Lancaster County provisions mirrored these infractions, treating the behavior as a county-level affront. Theft charges covered the appropriation of the items. Criminal trespass to property targeted the invasive actions. Vandalism functioned as a public nuisance, degrading shared spaces. Receiving stolen property addressed the custody of the displaced portraits. Federal offenses provided an additional layer, given the exhibit's connection to the National America 250 initiative. Theft of government property under 18 U.S.C. Section 641 attached to the conversion of federally connected materials. Destruction of government property under Section 1361 accounted for the devaluation inflicted on the commemorative display. These violations collectively form a cohesive record of misconduct, harming Nebraska's governance and highlighting the need for accountability in public service. Scenarios for private citizens and expected outcomes. A private Nebraska citizen attempting to remove portraits or similar items from the Capitol faces immediate and severe legal repercussions, differing markedly from the senator's experience. In the base scenario, where the citizen removes portraits and places them in another room, NSP confronts the person on site, demanding return. Refusal leads to arrest for theft by unlawful taking and criminal mischief. Minimum outcomes include a misdemeanor citation, $500 to $1,000 fine, and capital ban. Maximum penalties involve felony charges for substantial disruption, with 2 years prison, $10,000 fine, and restitution for rehanging. Investigations proceed with footage review and questioning, lasting days to weeks. The Capitol's surveillance system captures every movement, ensuring no act goes unnoticed. Authorities prioritize quick resolution to maintain public order, but for a citizen, this means no leniency or deferred judgment. The base act of relocation still constitutes control over property without consent, triggering automatic reporting to the Lancaster County Attorney for formal charges. If the citizen takes items home, the crime escalates to theft with intent to deprive. NSP identifies the person via cameras and issues a warrant. Minimum is a Class 1 misdemeanor with 1 year jail. Maximum is a Class IIA felony for high value with 20 years prison and $25,000 fine. Home searches recover items, and the citizen faces a criminal record. For removals from multiple exhibits, charges multiply to vandalism and trespass. Minimum is fines totaling $2,000 with community service. Maximum is felony mischief for widespread disruption, with 5 to 10 years prison. Damage during removal adds aggravated charges. Minimum is Class 2 misdemeanor with 6 months jail. Maximum is Class 4 felony with 2 years prison and civil claims. These variations depend on factors like the number of items and the extent of interference, but all scenarios involve NSP's rapid response team securing the scene and collecting evidence for prosecution. After-hours removals introduce burglary. Minimum is Class IIA felony with 1 year prison. Maximum is aggravated burglary with 20 to 50 years. In all cases, NSP detains, books at Lancaster County Jail, and prosecutes without leniency. Minimum for cooperation is citation and probation. Maximum for resistance is pretrial detention and trial. The citizen's lack of official status means full exposure to the legal system, with no protective buffers. Investigations often extend to background checks for priors, influencing bail decisions and sentencing. Overall, the process emphasizes deterrence, ensuring private citizens understand the gravity of interfering with state property, leading to outcomes that deter future violations through financial and personal costs. Comparison to Machaela Cavanaugh's treatment. Cavanaugh removed 8 to 10 frames to her office, with NSP returning them undamaged the same day. No charges were filed, and no investigation occurred. Her excuse of rule violations masked abuse of power, allowing her to avoid arrest. A private citizen receives no such pass. NSP enforces strictly, leading to charges even for returned items. The disparity begins at the moment of confrontation, where a senator's status prompts deference rather than detention. Cavanaugh's ability to transport items to her office without immediate seizure illustrates how official privilege alters enforcement dynamics. Private citizens face handcuffs and booking, while her position enabled a quiet resolution through NSP coordination. Cavanaugh's position enabled her to commit acts a citizen cannot, using her office to justify removal as authority exercise. This abuse highlights her ability to evade consequences for theft and mischief that would jail a regular Nebraskan. The disparity shows how officials operate above the law, with Cavanaugh facing only a reprimand request that led to nothing. Her public apology on the legislative floor served as the sole repercussion, contrasting with the criminal record and financial burdens imposed on citizens. The senator's access to internal channels allowed her to bypass standard protocols, turning a criminal act into a minor political footnote. Citizens lacking such access endure full prosecutorial scrutiny from the Lancaster County Attorney. The comparison reveals systemic favoritism, where Cavanaugh's actions, identical in nature to a citizen's, resulted in zero legal fallout. Private citizens undergo investigations lasting weeks with warrants and searches, while her case closed the same day. This underscores how abuse of power shields officials, allowing them to commit violations without fear of indictment. The reprimand request, initiated by a fellow senator, amounted to nothing, unlike the trials and pleas citizens face. The incident exemplifies how privilege distorts justice, with citizens bearing the full weight of statutes like Section 28 to 511, while senators escape through immunity and deference. Hate crime enhancements and additional crimes. Hate crime enhancements apply if the removal shows bias, such as targeting white male founders due to prejudice against race or gender. Nebraska Section 28 to 111 enhances penalties for bias against protected classes, turning mischief or theft into felonies. Federal Section 249 criminalizes bias-motivated acts with 10 years prison. Section 245 for interfering with education based on bias. Other crimes include burglary, Section 28 to 507, menacing, Section 28 to 310, stalking, Section 28 to 311.03. City-county add public nuisance. Federal includes conspiracy, Section 371. These tie to the removal as prejudice-driven. The enhancement under Section 28 to 111 increases classification by one level, making misdemeanors felonies when motivated by hate against race, gender, or ancestry. For the exhibit, targeting white male portraits elevates basic theft to a more severe offense, reflecting the discriminatory intent. Additional crimes build on the core violations, with burglary applying if entry intent involves theft. Menacing covers intimidation created by the act, enhanced for bias. Stalking involves focused pursuit of items due to prejudice. City ordinances like public nuisance address degradation of shared spaces. County adds destruction of property. Federal conspiracy applies if coordinated with others for bias motives. These offenses interconnect, forming a web of violations tied to the removal's prejudicial nature. The bias against white males as founders amplifies each charge, ensuring higher penalties across jurisdictions. The enhancements and additional crimes ensure comprehensive accountability for prejudice-driven acts. Nebraska Section 28 to 111 directly applies to elevate state charges. Federal Section 249 and Section 245 provide national-level prosecution for bias in public interference. The combination of burglary, menacing, and stalking with core theft and mischief creates a unified pattern of hate-motivated conduct. City and county additions like nuisance reinforce local impacts. Federal conspiracy broadens the scope if group involvement exists. This framework ties all elements to the incident, emphasizing how bias transforms property interference into enhanced hate crimes. Abuse of power and immunity for Nebraska legislators. Nebraska legislators possess significant authority that can be abused when they misuse their positions for personal or partisan purposes, as demonstrated by Machaela Cavanaugh's removal of portraits from the PragerU exhibit. By framing her actions as enforcement of Capitol rules, she concealed the underlying motive while exercising privileges unavailable to private citizens. This form of abuse occurs when officials exploit their access and status to commit acts that would otherwise result in immediate arrest and prosecution. The senator's ability to transport the portraits to her office without resistance illustrates how legislative power creates a protective shield, allowing interference with public property under the guise of official duty. Such conduct erodes the boundary between lawful oversight and criminal behavior, as the senator faced no on-site detention despite clear evidence of unauthorized taking. The Nebraska Constitution, Art. 3, Section 15, grants legislators arrest immunity during sessions and for 15 days before and after, except in cases of treason, felony, or breach of the peace. This broad protection effectively shields misdemeanors like theft by unlawful taking or criminal mischief from immediate consequences. Kavanaugh benefited from this immunity, avoiding handcuffs and booking that a private citizen would endure. The privilege enables officials to engage in conduct that disrupts public spaces or property without fear of swift enforcement. It also discourages law enforcement from pursuing charges aggressively, as any action against a sitting legislator risks political backlash. This constitutional safeguard, originally designed to protect legislative function, becomes a tool for evading accountability when abused. The disparity extends beyond legal protections to practical realities of office access and authority. Legislators enjoy unrestricted movement throughout the Capitol, including areas restricted to the public, allowing them to interact with exhibits in ways that invite misconduct. Cavanaugh's removal relied on this access, which a private citizen lacks. The abuse manifests in the ability to justify questionable acts through self-proclaimed rule interpretation, a tactic unavailable to outsiders. This power imbalance not only protects individual legislators, but also normalizes a culture where officials operate with reduced fear of repercussions. The incident reveals how such immunities and privileges distort equal application of the law, creating a two-tiered system that favors those in power. Collusion and conflicts of interest between legislators and law enforcement. Conflicts of interest between Nebraska legislators and law enforcement agencies arise primarily from the legislature's control over the Nebraska State Patrol's budget and resources. Legislators approve funding for NSP operations, correctional facilities, and related programs, creating a dynamic where law enforcement leaders may hesitate to pursue investigations against sitting members to avoid risking budget cuts or political retaliation. This structural influence fosters an environment of deference, where NSP personnel prioritize maintaining positive relationships with legislators over strict, impartial enforcement. In cases involving lawmakers, this can result in delayed, or minimal responses to misconduct, allowing officials to evade scrutiny that private citizens cannot escape. In Cavanaugh's case, the Nebraska State Patrol returned the removed portraits undamaged the same day without filing charges or initiating a formal investigation, despite clear security footage documenting the act. This rapid resolution, without further action, suggests a level of deference consistent with conflicts of interest. NSP operates under the executive branch, but interacts frequently with legislators on security matters, creating opportunities for influence. The lack of prosecution aligns with a pattern where law enforcement avoids confrontations that could provoke legislative oversight or funding repercussions. Such outcomes reinforce perceptions of favoritism, as the same agency would detain and charge a private citizen for identical behavior. Cavanaugh's prior interactions with law enforcement further illustrate these conflicts. Her denied access to the McCook ICE detention facility, which she claimed violated state law granting legislators inspection rights, resulted in no enforcement action against the facility. This incident highlights how legislators can assert authority without consequence, while agencies may defer to avoid escalation. The portrait removal incident reflects a similar pattern of inaction, where NSP's quick return of items without charges allowed Cavanaugh to escape accountability. These examples demonstrate how budgetary and political leverage enables collusion, undermining public trust in impartial law enforcement and perpetuating unequal treatment between officials and citizens. Conclusion: the stark disparity in justice and the need for reform. A private Nebraskan removing displays from the Capitol faces unrelenting justice across multiple scenarios, with immediate arrests, indictments, and investigations leading to penalties ranging from misdemeanors to felonies. In relocation cases, NSP confronts on-site, resulting in charges even if items are returned, with minimum outcomes of fines and bans and maximum felony prison terms for high-value disruption. Taking items home escalates to theft with intent to deprive, triggering warrants, home searches, and criminal records. Multiple or after-hours removals add burglary and aggravated charges, producing sentences up to 50 years. Authorities enforce rigorously, with no leniency for citizens lacking official status. This contrasts sharply with Cavanaugh's experience, where the same act produced no charges or investigation. The disparity stems from legislative immunity and abuse of power, allowing Cavanaugh to evade consequences that would jail a private citizen. Her position enabled justification of the removal as rule enforcement, masking bias and avoiding arrest. The Nebraska Constitution's arrest immunity during sessions shields misdemeanors, while her office access facilitated the act without immediate intervention. Conflicts of interest with law enforcement, driven by budgetary control, further enabled inaction, as NSP returned items without prosecution. This systemic favoritism erodes public confidence, creating a two-tiered justice system where officials operate above the law. Reform is essential to address these inequalities, limiting legislative immunity for clear criminal acts, establishing independent oversight for investigations involving lawmakers, and removing budgetary leverage over law enforcement would promote fairness, strengthening transparency in Capitol security protocols, and ensuring consistent enforcement regardless of status would deter abuse. Until such changes occur, ordinary citizens bear the full weight of statutes like theft and mischief, while legislators like Cavanaugh face minimal repercussions. The incident underscores the urgent need for structural changes to uphold equal protection and restore trust in Nebraska's governance institutions.